I know I'm late on this Arcadia review, but hey, better late than never. So I'll be reviewing Arcadia number 3. So if you want to see what's inside, well, stay tuned. So, and again, if you like what I do here, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me out, and it helps continue to make it possible for me to make these videos. Anyway, so let's look at Arcadia Volume 3. So we've covered the past 2 volumes so far, and something I don't recall if they did in the previous versions, but they definitely did here, maybe I'm just blanking, was they added this little qualifier here to tell you what it is. And I don't know, maybe I just missed it, and I think it was usually described in the subtext, but either way. So ancestries is the term they're using to represent races. Spells, new rules, and an adventure, right? Every Arcadia seems to have an adventure for some level characters. This one happens to be 3rd level. We have some new rules about aerial combat, which are actually really, really fun. And I feel like that's something, it's one of those things, and I hate you saying things like this, but it's one of those things that doesn't come up until it does. And obviously, Ted, that's how everything happens. But you know, you might not ever deal with aerial combat in your game. You might not deal with it for years, depending on how long your game is, or it might be something you have to look at every single time because you have somebody who has access to a flying magic item or access to magical flight. And then the ancestries are 3 new, very unique and very interesting options for you to play as your character. And what I'll probably focus in the most is because it's the one that's probably near and dearest to my heart, and it's my good friend Celeste Conowitch's work, is the 10 new spells you need in 5e. And I will say most of those are taken from or heavily inspired by existing spells from older editions brought forth into 5e, which I've often talked about how there's a lot that I would like to have seen, and I've even talked about spells I'd like to have brought forward in the past. So we'll just quickly go through the ancestors. I'm not going to dive too deep into it, but the art is amazing. And I will say, I think this sets a very high and should be probably a standard bar for what information should be included, right? So if you think about the player's handbook, we got a lot of flavor text, like pages, basically, of flavor text about the races at the start. And then if you look at like Xanathar's Guide and other more recent races we've received, it's just like little tiny blurbs. And in some cases, like the monstrous races, say in, I mean, I said Xanathar's, I meant Volos. But like in Volos, if you look at like the section for like playing a Yuan-Ti, playing a Bugbear, or any of that stuff, there's like a line that describes it, and then it's just the stat block. Not about like how to interact with them as player characters. You need to read the monster stuff and then apply it. So anyway, first up here is the Lucidling, which that's clearly abolithic in design. It's terrifying, but also I feel like it reminds me of stuff I remember from like the 80s, and like this would be like a puppet character you'd see in like a sitcom kind of a thing. But basically, it's an unwanted born child from a dreaming aberration, which we know that's how beholders come into existence, as they dream them in. That's kind of what these guys are. The Sand Speaker, also the art is just phenomenal on all of these. The Sand Speaker here is pretty cool. It's basically a sort of like an ooze-like creature, but it says it's basically when glass-type structures are created from the sand of the Astral Sea, or the shores of the Astral Sea. It says Sand Speakers look like sauntering humanoid sculptures stretched from dried glass. Very cool. And they have kind of some, look at all the background text here, right? We have some pretty interesting dream-based abilities, which makes sense for the Astral Sea. And then the Somnian just looks like it's basically like a living constellation. And I didn't see any direct correlation to what it could be. But this one has basically more dream powers, but more in the way of nightmares. So now we're going to roll into the spells. So if you take a look here, you can see we have new Bard, Cleric, Druid, Ranger, Sorcerer, Wizard, and Warlock spells. WTF, Celeste, no Paladin spells. It's fine, I get it. The spells don't really fit a Paladin. But come on, Pallies. And also, before anybody comes out and says, why didn't you include anything for the Artificer? we can't. No one can, because it's not part of the open game license. So no one can write third-party content that's not part of the DM's Guild regarding anything with Artificers. Do I think the fact that Artificers came out in Tasha's and not just tied to Eberron, do I think that that means we should be updating the open game license? 100% we should, to incorporate this new canonical 13th class so that people can make stuff for it on their own and not have to make it through the DM's Guild. But anyway, so we can see we basically have Attract Metal, Erase, Glitter Dust, Stoned Heart, Nature's Ladder, Shrink, Rainbow Recurve, Silver Wings, and Permanency. I think that covers all of them. We'll scroll down. I'm not going to read through every single one. One thing that I would have liked to have seen, but this again might be because you know, referencing older editions, I don't know exactly the mechanics and laws there, but I would like to have seen a little thing that kind of like, and again, it's a magazine, so there's not like, or an e-zine, whatever it is, there's not like a ton of room to put stuff, but I would have liked like a little box text caveat thing telling me this was the spiritual successor to this pre-existing spell. So Attract Metal is pretty much that. It's a magnetism spell. Pulls something to you made out of metal. Erase is an interesting spell because technically there isn't, I guess maybe you could get by with prestidigitation, but it's a means to clean off, you know, basically clean evidence, remove stuff off of a parchment, clear off a scroll. Also it has stuff in here about removing glyphs from the Glyph of Warding or the symbol spell. One that I want to focus on here is Glitter Dust, because this is often one that I see homebrewed. I've done my own homebrew version of this. And I'd have to go back and reread Glitter Dust. But basically what it was kind of, in older editions, it was like a fairy fire, but with other benefits. It was like a fairy fire that also blinds you, as you basically glitter bomb somebody. So Celeste's version here is a 3rd level spell in a 15-foot cone, and it lasts for a minute non-concentration, which I think is important. So each creature in that cone is coated in glitter, and they can't become invisible, right? So that is an automatic thing for the full minute. They can't become invisible no matter what. In addition, creatures in the area of the spell must make a con save or become blinded for the duration. Again, this is a con save or blind non-concentration for a minute. The creature can make the saving throw at the end of their turn, ending it on a success. That's pretty solid. I think the original Glitter Dust had range in that you could do an area, and almost like you pick a point and drop it rather than a cone. But I think this works out well, the fact that the cone keeps it close range and it sort of balances out the non-concentration duration. Nature's Ladder is really cool. Lets you grow a tree, perfectly designed for climbing, literally making a ladder where there wasn't one out of a tree. Permanency is a spell that we had in older editions for those of you who are new to D&D. Permanency is pretty much in the name. You would pick a spell, typically of lower level. I think in older editions it might have even given you the list of spells you could choose to cast, but you essentially make that spell permanent. You apply it to yourself, and now it's part of you forever until it's dispelled. The only downside with a permanency spell is it is still a spell, therefore it's still usable by, you know, dispel magic can still remove it. It is an 8th level spell, so unlikely, but the mechanics behind the way dispel magic works and someone getting a lucky roll could mean your permanent spell is disabled. So there's a lot of material components here, as it should be expensive, as that's important, but basically choose a spell of 5th level or lower that you can cast. If it has a duration of 1 minute or longer and a casting time of 1 hour or shorter and can target you, and then you choose to cast Permanency as part of the casting of Permanency, you cast that spell, both spell slots are expended, and now that spell is applied to your character after the 1 hour casting time permanently until dispelled, and as part of being applied permanently, it does not require concentration. I'm sure all of you can think of several things that you could use this on. Probably one of the ones that a lot of you will go to right off the gate is haste, right? You could apply haste to yourself and make it permanent. Again, it's still dispellable as is regular haste. But in my mind, and I think the way it's written here is you don't dispel the you don't dispel the haste, you dispel the permanency. Spells may be permanent, requiring no concentration. Do not require the use of a spell slot beyond the initial casting. If the spell you cast with permanency is dispelled... Oh, okay, so if the spell you cast with permanency is dispelled, both of them are ended. You can only have one permanent spell up at a time, right? So again, it's 5th level or lower, but this could be something like... You'd want to have it be something not like Mirror Image, right? Which is non-concentration anyway, so it's probably not a great example, but Mirror Image, they attack the images, and then they're gone. You might want something like Fly, Permanent Flight, you know, maybe Shield of Faith. Again, Haste is another great example. These kind of spells that you could apply to yourself and then just have it as like a rolling buff. Even, probably to a lesser extent, even like the enhance ability spells, like the ones that give you advantage on like, I don't know, dexterity checks or something like that. You could have that on all the time. Very cool. I'll be incorporating this into my game. We have Rainbow Recurve, which has some really awesome art from Jetpack 7. This is basically Celeste's updated version of the old Prismatic Bow spell. Basically, you know, it functions in a lot of ways similar to the Prismatic spells, right? Prismatic Wall, Prismatic Spray. You conjure forth a rainbow bow, or a rainbow, if you will. And it shoots magical energy arrows that deal 3d8 force damage. And the creature must make a dex saving throw or face an additional effect determined by the color of the arrow that you generated. And once you fire an arrow, the corresponding color disappears from the bow and you can't select it again. You obviously have all the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, green, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. And then it does extra effects, right? The original ones here are extra damage, 3d8 damage of a specific type. Indigo is paralysis, and violet is blinded. It must make a wisdom saving throw. If it succeeds, it's ended. If it fails, it's transported to another plane of existence of the DM's choosing and is no longer blinded. Shrink. Now you might say, why do we need Shrink? We already have Enlarge Reduce. Well, Enlarge Reduce allows you, one, to give the ability to let people grow, and it also allows people to be smaller, but it's only by a size category. Shrink literally shrinks the creature or the object that you're choosing for up to an hour down to a height of 1 inch and a weight of 1 pound. So you can carry them around. You can literally shrink something down. And what's interesting is this is a great way to be able to like ambush somebody. You could shrink your barbarian and put him in your pocket and be like, oh, bring it into combat. Go! And then they grow full size and can fight. Let's see. Until the spell ends, the target is disadvantaged on strength checks and strength saving throws. Their weapons shrink to match their new size. While they're reduced, they deal 1 damage. Makes sense for a tiny creature. If the object was not already tiny before the spell was cast, its speed is half for the duration. Oh, because you can also choose to do this on someone unwillingly and shrink them down. Like you can, I'm only been just thinking of like moving something heavy very easily or shrinking a party member down this height to move them somewhere. But it also gives you the ability to target a creature and they must make a con saving throw and be shrunk, or on a failure that has no effect. Let's see. Yeah, the other thing is it's concentration for an hour, but if they fail that initial constitution saving throw, they are shrunk for that time period. They don't get to make the save again at the end of the turn, so that's something that you can consider, right? I can shrink you down, and then now I've got you like this for an hour. And then we have Silver Wings, which is you summon wings that allow you to have a flight speed, and then you can use a bonus action to attack with those wings, dealing slashing damage. And there's also a nice little thing where you can end it and launch the metallic feathers in a 60-foot cone and deal piercing damage. This reminds me very much of the Fire Wings spell, and it may be inspired by that, because Fire Wings was very similar. Although with Fire Wings, your arms became the fire. Like you didn't have wings and then still had access to your arms. I don't know why I did a crab motion, but your arms became fiery wings that you could attack people with. And I think if you ended them early, they did like a burst attack. And we have Stoneheart, which is pulling your heart out of your chest, turning your heart to stone so that you can survive and maybe almost sort of have temporary lichdom in a way. Yeah, so I think there's some other benefits too. But you can't heal with rests. You can only heal by magic while this is going on. And let's see. If you die, you automatically succeed on all death saving throws, and if you die, you reform. And lastly is Walking Dead, which is literally a Weekend at Bernie's spell where you reanimate a corpse enough to kind of, again, allow it to Weekend at Bernie's. And like I said, we have Aces High, a whole series of rules and very interesting stuff for dealing with aerial combat. Even talking about how to deal with angles and things like that, sample encounters, And then we have a Diamond in the Rough, which is a sort of mystery whodunit, find a thief style adventure that looks pretty fun. So, and the monsters in it are pretty awesome. So, there we go, folks. That is Arcadia Issue 3. Pretty exciting. These are nice to have, right? These Arcadias coming out, giving us a little bit to look forward to, a little bit of higher quality D&D content. Also, a huge shout out to the MCDM team for the not ridiculous, actually. Let me rephrase that. To the living wage that they're paying their writers, which is, in my mind, I think it's over double the standard industry rate for most freelance gigs for writing, which is amazing. They're really putting in, and you can see it clearly, right? They pulled in amazing writers who are putting their all into this, and they're helping to do it to allow them to write and create content at a means that is livable compared to what sometimes people have to write with, not a lot. So anyway, it's awesome. I look forward to the next. I think we're promised, 5 issues was 5 or 6 issues was the initial run, and then it'll be time to evaluate to see whether it's cost effective and whether the interest is there before they kind of maybe turn this into a ongoing monthly thing forever. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What was your favorite part of Arcadia Volume 3? Also, because so many of you have pointed me to the Illrigger, the other recent class, it looks like almost like an anti-paladin dark character type class that was released by MCDM. I also picked that up, so I'll be able to review that for all of you, because I know people want to know my opinion on that. So again, I haven't read that yet. I'll read through it and we'll make another video on it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.